What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shaped their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yaeger, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. Welcome to Corporate Competitor Podcast. The premise of the show is to learn how sports shape today's business icons. I've had the opportunity to sit down with some incredible executives. Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan, who played rugby at Brown. Topgolf CEO Dolph Burley, who is a world champion pole vaulter, and the highest ranking woman in the oil drilling industry, Kim McHugh, who played volleyball at Texas A&M. But in the spirit of year-end reflection, I've chosen this last episode of 2020 as a chance to invite our amazing podcast producer, Savannah Gallagher, for a fun behind-the-scenes look at our time recording Corporate Competitor Podcast. You will learn the why behind the podcast, and we'll get to laugh with us at a funny moment or two and the bloopers that happened when the mic wasn't live. Savannah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Don. It definitely feels a little strange to be on this side of the microphone.
Well, you've obviously done such a great job, as was noted in all the things you've just asked me to say about how incredible you are. So it's exciting to let our listeners understand what it is to work in this environment and to let you prompt me with a few questions.
Yes, I think it'll be really fun to get a little behind the scenes look. And I really just want to start out with, tell us how Corporate Competitor Podcast began.
Well, so I will tell you that I've always loved the intersection of sports and business, and how, there's some people who think, sports analogies are overused. The truth is, I don't think they're used enough. I think there are direct relationships where we're able to look and say, these are things you can learn from sports that you can apply into business. So when this idea came to be after reading some work done by Ernst & Young, I was at a Make-A-Wish national board meeting where I serve on the board with a man by the name of Dolph Burley. He is the CEO of Topgolf and one of my all-time favorite people on the planet. And we were there in Phoenix at the board meeting, and this is back when board meetings could be in person. And I ended up on a park bench with Dolph, and we were just talking about things that both of us hope to accomplish in the next year. And I brought up the podcast idea, knowing that Dolph had a history in sports. His reaction was, his mind immediately started spinning, as most great leaders' minds do. And he says, I don't only love the idea, I want to be on this. I want to do something with you. And I asked him, I said, would you be my first guest? And he said, absolutely. He was fired up about it. So the idea took hold when I actually saw someone who was a perfect guest, as Dolph was, light up with the thought of what the conversation could look like.
And that was before we even had a title. At that point, it was just an idea.
Right.
And I got an email from you, crazy idea and great news. Dolph loves it too. So that was a fun, interesting start to this creativity.
Yeah, I think Savannah will tell anybody that ever gets a chance to talk to her that emails that begin with crazy idea, they come in about 3 or 4 times a week at least. And most of the ideas are in fact crazy.
But this one was a great one. And we have had so much fun. So I am actually on all the podcast recordings, and unfortunately we have to do them over Zoom. We can't be in person for these interviews because of what 2020 has brought, but we've had a lot of fun, and I have the pleasure of being on the call with all these incredible leaders. And I know of one moment that absolutely cracks me up that I would love for you to share with the listeners, and then they will actually get to hear it unfold. I'm going to have our amazing editor, Frank, actually put in the clip so they can laugh with us. But tell the listeners what happened with Joe Qualia.
So we're interviewing Joe, who's just an amazing business leader, was the president of the Americas for Tech Data, a huge organization. And when everything had to move because of the pandemic, this setup actually was constructed not from my office, but moved into my home where we have a little apartment that is a mother-in-law suite. And I'm in the apartment, but also in the apartment is a laundry room. It had happened that my daughter was doing laundry. She's 10 years old and she was doing this laundry for her school. And she'd come in, and to keep quiet, she had closed the door to the laundry room. And what she didn't know was that in closing it, she actually locked herself in the laundry room. So
That's awesome.
I see her going in the laundry room while I'm doing this because it's out of the corner of my eye, but I don't notice that she doesn't come back out for 15 minutes, right? And the deal was she was locked in there. She knew I was recording and she was trying to figure out, how do I let my dad know I'm locked in and I can't get out? So, yeah, the embarrassing moment of having to stop an interview and say, excuse me, but to avoid the Department of Children and Families showing up at my house because my daughter was locked in a laundry room, we have to stop recording right here.
Absolutely. And it was the beginning of the episode. It's not like we were, a couple minutes from the end. We were at the beginning of the episode. Take a listen here.
How to shoot a basketball. I remember I could not get a basketball up to the rim from, shooting it until I was maybe 8 years old. It was just, something I struggled with, but they always taught me. But there was one defining moment that I remember going
Hey
back.
guys, I'm so sorry. I just realized that my daughter locked herself in the closet right here. This is so.
Please go.
Santa, give me 1 second.
Please go ahead.
Yes.
The working from home benefits, right?
That's a new one. I've not experienced that one yet.
So
is Maddie okay, Don?
Yeah.
We don't have to call Child Protection Services, do we?
No. Well, she had come over here and I was like giving her like the paw, like I'm not talking to you thing. And so she decided to go in to a closet, but she locked herself in. So then, I hear this and I've got headphones on. So I'm going, what is that? And I realized she locked herself in the closet. Anyway, my apologies.
No worries.
Savannah, edit. There you go.
Yep, that's the power of editing.
This
I got
is the power
you guys.
of editing. Oh, well, the upside is no one was injured in the making of that episode.
Awesome. Then speaking of closets, another one of my favorites was Carla Vernon. She even said to us by the end of the episode, she felt like we were all best friends. So the entire recording experience was fun, but partly because of how she started the episode. Where was she recording?
She was actually on the floor of her closet. I mean, it's so beautiful. See, Carla is such an amazing woman and wanted to make sure that what she was giving everyone, including those who might listen, the very best experience. She had read that the clothes in your closet would give you the quality of a sound booth. And so she did. She moved herself into her closet to record this episode.
And as a producer, I loved it because the audio quality was fantastic. And the backdrop was her shoe rack. So we had a good laugh with that.
And Carla has some nice shoes. That's good. That's what I left there with.
Those are funny moments, but do you have a favorite moment while building out this series?
I do. This one, again, it goes to Carla. And so that's pretty extraordinary. One of the things that we set out to do at the beginning of this was when asking people to be a guest. I've been a guest on a lot of podcasts, and most of them, the second you're done, the next note you'll get will say, please promote our podcast. And that's it, right? That's kind of where the conversation ends. And we wanted to be a little different than that. So our thought was we wanted to try to do things to say thank you and show love for the people that were giving us their time to be our interview subjects. And one of the first things we did was we started listening to these podcasts with an ear for who are the other names they mention in the podcast. Who is that coach that poured into them as a young person? Who was the person that gave them the sense of confidence that would make them great? And while doing Carla's podcast, she made reference to a ballet studio in Buffalo, New York, that she attended as a young girl, right? It was called the American Academy of Ballet in Buffalo. And the owner of the studio, the woman that she referenced, was Miss Maris Battaglia. So we thought, oh, this is so cool, right? That was tiny Carla, right? Young girl Carla. And now she's this extraordinary business leader and someone of great significance. What if we could find Miss Maris? And Savannah, you and the amazing team of interns that you have went to work on it. And we found her and we sent her a note. Then I'm sitting at home one night, a couple of nights after the Carla episode had run. It was 8 o'clock, phone rings at my house, and I looked, and it's this unknown number in Buffalo. My wife, Jeanette, actually looks and says, gosh, well, I have family in Buffalo. Maybe you should pick that up. And I do, and it's a woman who says, and she's almost in tears, and she says, Don Yaeger, you don't know who I am, but you have made you've made my day. You've made my year. Like, this is awesome. And I'm sitting there going, where's this going, right? And she says, my name is Maris Battaglia. And she goes, the name probably won't be one you'll remember, but you sent me a note with this podcast, which I listened to. And to know that this young girl that I had a chance to pour into when she was tiny blossomed into this unbelievable woman and leader. And that now you're connecting me back into that is just something I cannot thank you enough for. And she's crying by this stage, and she's talking about how incredible Carla was and how she'd love to get back in touch with her. And so I said, Miss Maris, if you'll write me an email, I'll send it to Carla and maybe the two of you can reconnect. And the next morning she writes me an email. Actually, she says in the title of it that she'd spent all night writing it. So that's pretty cool. But it says, Dear Mr. Yaeger, I'm so sorry that I interrupted your dinner last night. Family time is more important now than ever. I can't even begin to tell you how deeply your wonderful email affected me. And thank you for taking the time to find American Academy's info. I literally had tears streaming down my face as I read it. A few months ago, my husband and I were watching a special program on General Mills. I looked up, and this beautiful black woman on the screen, and I said to Richard, I know that face. That's Carla. Her name came up on the screen, and I was beside myself. I tried to find a contact number the next morning online. I couldn't. As she puts in parentheses, I'm old and not real computer savvy. Carla and her whole family had become a very special part of my life. We were close, and she was so talented and so smart, and I loved her to pieces. Last night, I listened to your podcast, and I cried some more. So, dear man, because of you, I couldn't sleep last night. Memories flooded me. Thank you for your amazing reach out. Please let me know how I can get in touch with dear Carla. I'm going to play her podcast again tonight, and the next night, and the night after that. Thank you again. Stay safe. Fondly, Miss Maris. I'm going to tell you that one just really, and then the ability to put her back together with Carla and have the two of them reestablish a relationship. It proved that, yeah, Carla was an amazing guest and an unbelievable storyteller, and her content is off the charts. But at the end of the day, this little piece of something that we tried to do to make sure that she understood how special we felt she was as a guest, I'll never forget. And it has inspired us in the way we try to do this around every podcast. In fact, for Dolph Burley at Topgolf, he referenced a coach that he'd had in track in college, and we reached out, realized the coach had passed away. But one of those amazing folks that you have working for you, Savannah, went into the obituary, found the names of the coach's 3 children, and we reached out to them to tell them, hey, you should know this amazing business leader, Dolph Burley, talked about your dad and the influence he had, and it might just bring back a nice, fun memory. And in fact, the family wrote, and we're so grateful that they had that opportunity to reach back and connect again with Dolph. So in every way, this hasn't just been a podcast. It's kind of been this really neat opportunity to pour into the lives, not just of those who are listening, but those that are giving us their time.
Absolutely. And I still have the email from Ed Stoll, Dolph's coach, from his son hanging on my bulletin board above my desk, because that is truly the why in doing this. We want to help all of our listeners be better leaders, be equipped. And you always say, Don, success leaves clues. So we're going to study those clues. And for years, I mean, you sat down with Michael Jordan, you have Shaquille O'Neal's shoe in your office, and you have all the great sports memorabilia because of your experience at Sports Illustrated and into your writing career as an author. But this is just so different and so cool because these are executives talking about their sporting experience. It's just so cool to watch them reflect and think about these memories that they have not thought about in 40 years. I mean, on Kent Thielen, who is the CEO of Mayo Clinic Florida and the vice president of Mayo Clinic, he told us the story of the fourth down play, and he still remembers what the coach said.
Of his high school championship game. Yeah, exactly.
And decades ago.
Yeah, that's the fun part, right? I mean, these are opportunities to relive moments of significance, right? And this isn't just people still living in their past because they haven't lived in this past, but the past does live in them. And I think that I've never quite said it that way before, but as I think about it, that's exactly what this is, right? It's an opportunity to bring the past that lives in them to the front of a great conversation.
And it's so fun because you don't get those vivid descriptions on the podcast unless you're bringing those facts up. Can you talk about the importance of the research and the fun that you've had with your books?
Oh my gosh. I have to tell you, just so for those listeners who don't know, one of the things we do is in this research package that we build before every interview. Again, no one enters this podcast where the opening question is, so tell me why you're significant today. We know right down to who the junior varsity high school coach might have been and maybe some lesson they might have learned there. But these packages are so valuable that we share the package of research with each one of these executives before we begin the call. And when they see the yearbook pictures that we've pulled, and many of them are hilarious, as you might imagine, because they're high school yearbook pictures from many years ago. Some of them, the founder of Hendrick Motorsports, Rick Hendrick, who owns car dealerships around the country, superstar in the automotive and the car racing industry, NASCAR industry. When he's looking and going, gosh, I was considered best dressed and I was considered best looking in high school. He was hoping that what he really was most athletic, but that went to somebody else. Anyway, bottom line is, as he's looking at these, he's laughing, and it brings them back to this period, and it's pretty extraordinary. So I love that Andrew does that, and I love that people react as they do.
Definitely. So we talk about great moments. Can you share one thing that has been difficult for you in this recording period?
I would tell you, I mean, again, we're a couple dozen episodes in, but we had actually intended to begin the podcast a little bit earlier in the year. But at the start of the summer, I tested positive for the coronavirus, as did my wife, our children. We went into quarantine, but my sickness actually got significantly worse. I ended up in the intensive care unit for almost 9 days, being treated for the very worst that it could be at that time of COVID infection. Without question, it didn't just slow down the podcast. It derailed everything in my life for about a month, because I wasn't just so sick, I was in the hospital, but even getting out, I'd spent weeks on oxygen tanks trying to make sure that I could recover well enough to be here, sitting here today doing this. So yeah, it threw things off quite significantly, but at the same time, taught me some pretty powerful lessons that my family and I will hold dear forever.
Yeah, it was definitely a scary time for the whole team. We're praying for you, and we're obviously so happy that you look back at it now as almost a good thing and an opportunity for you to learn how to appreciate everything that you really have.
One of the greatest gifts I've been given in quite some time.
Absolutely. So you've had a chance to learn from really amazing people for a really long time. We talk about the lessons you've learned from John Wooden, Michael Jordan, really amazing athletes. But as far as the executives that we have had in the first 23 episodes, what has been a lesson that really stands out?
Wow. Well, there's just been so many, but I do have to tell you, when I knew you were going to ask me this question, I went back through the episodes, and John Maxwell had some really great content in our session with him, in which he talked about the bookends of success when he thinks of what does it look like to be successful. And it's preparation. So you prepare yourself well for the opportunity. The opportunity is somewhere in the middle. And then the other bookend is reflection, and that not enough people think about reflection as an important part of the process, but it's where you get that opportunity to go backwards and get a chance to understand what did you do and how did you get from the experience what you need to be able to grow into what might come next.
And I know that you do that as well. You and John Maxwell talked about your mutual love for John Wooden. Can you share your end of the year reflection routine?
I'd love to. So I'll tell you, this actually comes from John Wooden. And when Coach and I were working together a number of years, we talked regularly about different concepts, but one of them was this concept of reflection. And it was about this idea that you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And so one morning, Coach and I were at breakfast at his favorite little restaurant called Vips there in the Santa Monica area in California. And he took a sheet of paper and he drew two lines down the middle of the sheet. And he asked me to take the first column and write the names of the 5 people I spent my most time with professionally. The middle column were the people who I spent my most time with in my personal life. And the third column would be maybe some kind of social organization, whether that's church or a Kiwanis club or something. And he was saying, remember, your inner circle is who you spend your time with, not who you wished you spent your time with, but who you actually give your time to. That's your inner circle. Now look at these 15 names tonight and ask yourself, are they going where you're going? Do they want for you what you want for you? Or are they, as occasionally happens, an anchor that every time you're with them, you're dragged down? And he said, as you evaluate your inner circle, scratch names from the list if they don't fit and begin to look for who will replace them. It doesn't mean that you scratch people out of your life, but you just give them less time. And Coach Wooden gave me that exercise. I was so enamored with it that I actually started making it a part of my year-end routine. This is what I do at the end of every year. A lot of people make resolutions. I look at my inner circle. I try to evaluate and say, boy, you know what? That person really would be of value. I would gain so much inspiration if I could spend more time with that person. I'm going to commit myself to making that happen because these are very intentional acts, the creation of your inner circle. So I did that. I made it a part of my annual reflection effort, and it's absolutely played a role in everything I believe I've been fortunate enough to achieve over the last decade.
That's incredible. I love that because so often we can just go to the next year and the New Year's resolutions and we're focused on next year. But what did we learn about the past year? And yeah, I've seen really cool exercises of people putting in either blessings or lessons in a jar and then, reading them at the end of the year. But whatever it is, it's just so cool. Like John Maxwell said, it is important, not just skip. So, well, what is your advice, Don, to the leaders who listen? We always ask every guest, what's your advice to leaders about a certain topic? And my closing question for you would be, what advice do you have to the leaders who consume this podcast?
Savannah, I love that. And so my advice would be, don't just consume, digest, right? It's lunchtime, so I'll try not to make too many food-related jokes here. But the concept is that there are a lot of people that hear really great things in podcasts or in other opportunities, and they walk away and they're inspired and they think that's really amazing. But then they never do anything with those great ideas that they've been presented. So I want to make sure that people put into play the ideas that you're thinking of, right? When you hear something that you love in this podcast, do something. Activate. Make these lessons a part of what you're going to do next. That would be the thing I would offer to the people who are listening as my little nugget of advice as we bring this year to a close.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you to all of the listeners that listen week in and week out. We have amazing guests coming up in 2021. We are just so excited about getting you incredible leadership advice. And before we sign off, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Pappas and Dr. Flanagan at Florida State University. They have helped us line up an amazing internship program in the Career Center at Florida State. And the interns that we've had have been incredible. Luke, Alejandro, Ariana, Stefan, Dylan, Daniel, Faith. They make all this possible over the last year. And there's a lot behind the scenes from Andrew, Frank, Brett, John, Angie, that just makes this all possible. And I have to tell you, Don, you can attest to this. We have a lot of fun doing it.
We do. And I tell you, I think you do well the things that you have fun doing. And we have absolutely had a great time doing this.
And before long, Don, we're going to have to bring your yearbook photo out for everyone.
Hopefully Andrew never gets good enough that he can actually find them. For those of you who have taken time to listen to these podcasts, to enjoy this journey with us, know that we believe that greatness is available to all of us. Our opportunities to be better every day are what drive us. The questions we ask and the lessons we learn, but then more importantly, the things we activate upon will define whether tomorrow is in fact better than today. Use this. Use what we're talking about. Go be a corporate competitor. Drive yourself to levels and opportunities that you didn't think were possible previously. And then let's do this again at the end of 2021. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yaeger, who did that that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir. How are
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. As we enter the new year, we are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code PODCAST at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yaeger, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.